Hello, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a requested video on how to check and top up your vehicle's coolant. This is a very important step in preventing your vehicle from overheating or having your cooling system freeze up in below freezing weather. The first step in this process is to know what you're looking for. I'm going to show you a few examples which will be the most common cooling systems you may encounter. Our first example here is the most commonly found, which is our system that will have a radiator cap on the radiator itself and an overflow tank just to the side of it, or in this case just a little further away. On this system we will add the coolant directly to the radiator and have it fill the entire cooling system from here. But whenever you're checking your cooling system, you will want to wait till the engine has been off for a few hours and is no longer under pressure, or like this one has been sitting overnight, so no worry about it being pressurized. Now we'll want to remove the radiator cap, but as a safety measure, to avoid any coolant spraying towards you, if it were to somehow be pressurized, we can use a rag and place it over the radiator cap as we loosen it. This helps prevent any coolant from possibly spraying towards you, since it'll hit the rag and spray down. Not that we'll need it, but yet again it's a safety precaution. And this will rotate off in a counterclockwise direction. And once we have our radiator cap off, we'll want our level to be at this line or just below, which on this one the coolant is up to proper level. Now if the coolant level was invisible, we would need to add it till it was about at this point. So now we focus our attention to the coolant overflow, which is meant to retain coolant if the radiator releases coolant due to too much pressure buildup. And the way to tell when it's an overflow, it'll have a flimsy pop-up cap like this one, with a design of a small radiator and coolant in the middle of it. Or it'll just say coolant on the cap. And this will also have a level on it, which on this one says full cold, and being that this engine is cold, that is the level that we'll need to fill it to. And being that it is a little low, we will want to add some. But before we add it, let's check out these other systems. For this style system there will be no radiator cap on the radiator, but it'll have what is known as a coolant expansion tank. It may look like an overflow, but this style is pressurized, as you can tell by the style cap it uses. And for this style, we have no overflow, just this expansion tank. And we do got our fill line on this tank as well, which I'm not sure how well you can see the arrow, but it is pointing at this crease or joining line here in the middle. And we are definitely low on this one too. Now after verifying it's low, once again we want to make sure the system has been sitting for hours, enough so the engine has cooled down and the cooling system is no longer under pressure. Now that we know it's not under pressure, we'll remove this cap the same way as we did the radiator cap. And for our third and final system, we got our surge tank, found on newer vehicles like this Cadillac. This type has both the coolant expansion tank and the reservoir tank in one, so we'll have to fill both to the proper level. Our fill line level on the top tank is a little low, being that the fill line is almost to the top, but the reservoir, as you can see, is completely empty, so we will be needing to add coolant to both. And once again, this style cap will be pressurized, and we'll want to remove this cap the same way as the previous two, with the same precautions, avoiding doing this with the engine still hot or under pressure. Now that we know our cooling system is low, it's time to figure out what coolant we actually need. Sometimes it'll say on the cap itself, like on these GM vehicles, we say dexcool, which is the type of coolant most GM vehicles 95 and up will use. Or it will also give you this information in your vehicle's owner's manual. Like on these Hondas and Subarus, they use a blue coolant, and Toyotas, which use a pink colored coolant. So now you're at the store and know the coolant you're going for. But for certain coolants, you'll have two options, which is a concentrated coolant, which you'll have to mix yourself, or if you want to avoid that and buy one that's already pre-mixed, which as shown here is pre-mixed to 50-50, meaning 50% coolant and 50% water, which if you get this one, all we do is buy it and we're ready to fill. But I prefer this concentrated stuff because you get double for the price because you mix it yourself. But if you do go with this concentrated one, you will need a gallon of distilled water to mix it with. Why distilled water? Well, regular water has certain minerals that can lead to deposits building up in your cooling system, and that's the one thing you want to avoid. So we go with distilled water, which has the minerals and contaminants removed. Now that we have our distilled water and our coolant, it's time to mix them. But before mixing them, we want to figure out what ratio you want to go with. Preferably we go with a 50-50 mixture, but if you live somewhere else, where it's hotter than normal or colder than normal, you may want to mix it differently, like stated here on this bottle. Like for example, if you want your coolant to be able to sustain a hotter temperature, then you may want to mix this with say a 60% coolant and 40% water. But we're going to be going with a 50-50 mixture. So if you have an empty gallon, or I have this old empty coolant container, and I fill this about halfway, so there's half in this container, and the other half remains in our original container. Now we open our gallon of distilled water and pour half in one and the remaining half in the other. And now we have two properly mixed coolant containers. And now that they're mixed, it's time to fill all our vehicles to their fill line. Starting with this reservoir, we'll add it to the full cold line, and we're done. For our second one, we'll fill the expansion tank also to the fill line, and close it up. And finally, this surge tank plus its reservoir. On this top expansion tank, we'll just fill it to the line. And for its reservoir, we'll pop up the small cover, then we'll need a thin funnel that fits inside to be able to pour it in. With the funnel in place, let's add it till it reaches its fill line. Which is right there. Now for any of these systems, if they get to the point that the expansion tank is empty, or the radiator gets low, we'll need to burp out the air in the system, which will fill to the fill line as we did, but once it's topped up, with the cap off still, we'll want to run it for a few minutes so the water pump circulates the coolant. Also turning on the heater so it opens up that coolant passage as well. Now if you notice that the level drops down, we'll keep filling it to the line till it eventually stops going down. Once the coolant level stays there and doesn't go down, we're done and we can close up the radiator or the expansion tanks and turn off the car. Completing our coolant fill procedure. Well, I hope you were able to find this video helpful and informative. If so, please click that thumbs up button to support my video and my channel. And please subscribe if you haven't done so.